Okay, good afternoon and evening to everybody that's on now. I am going to be admitting people as we go. I know some people are probably going to come in through the halfway point, depending upon which platform they've chosen to use. So just so everybody is aware, we're going to be spending the first half of this discussion on MIT App Inventor and the second half on Thunkable. I had asked everybody to have been signed in prior to this, so you're ready to go. I am not going to take up any more time, so I'm going to introduce Joe Mazzone, who will be leading this. So Joe, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe, and I'm going to be walking you through the two most popular options for platforms creating your app for the Technovation competition. And so the first one we'll mainly be looking at is App Inventor, but let me share my screen quick and just have us discuss a few things. Just opening the chat also. All right, so you can access MIT App Inventor, which is the first platform we're going to be looking at today, by going to appinventor.mit.edu. I'm going to also put that in the chat. It'd be very useful if you haven't signed into that before, that you click on the Create Apps button over at the top, and you actually log into that so that you're ready to go. What I want to point out at the beginning of this, and Sarah, if I forget, try to remind me for if people jump in at the second half for Thunkable to still mention this, is that when you log into Technovation Girls platform, remember you have access to a curriculum. And although I'm going to give you some of the basics today that will really hopefully help you understand how MIT App Inventor and Thunkable work, there's still a lot of things that you can check out and a lot of things you still need to learn probably to bring your app to life. So I want to remind you that in the Technovation curriculum, when you log into Technovation Girls, there are different activities. They're marked with these blue rectangles and with this little code kind of symbol here. These are all ones that help you with programming specifically. And they specifically have lessons geared towards MIT App Inventor and Thunkable, the two platforms we're going to talk about today. Now, when you choose an app builder, there are different things to consider also. The options that you have is you either have MIT App Inventor or Thunkable, or you can use Java with Android Studio and Xcode if you want to use Swift to make iOS apps. So those are the different options. Most, I believe there's a table down here. Yep. So over half of the submissions are with App Inventor. Then you have a third that are with Thunkable, and then this small percentage that use Java or Swift. Don't feel that any one of them is going to give you any competitive edge in the competition. It doesn't. Really, it's your expertise. So those people that do Java stuff, they probably have taken a course with Java. As well as, even though I'm scrolling around kind of crazy here, what kind of how you can access these and what they're capable of doing. For instance, today, when we're looking at App Inventor, know that mostly you can only test that on Android. They do have a testing app for iOS. And if you're interested in App Inventor and want to do that, contact Sarah, Ruth, or myself, and we'll get you in touch with the MIT App Inventor team for them to give you the access to the way that you can test it on iOS. But one of the cool things about Thunkable is it is fully cross-platform, meaning the one app you build will work on iOS, Android, and as a web page. So that's one of the great things about that. The real-time testing also. So MIT App Inventor, you can test in real time on a phone or a tablet. You have to have the app installed. It also has an emulator. Thunkable, you can test it right in the web browser on an iPhone or iPad, as well as Android phone or tablet very easily. So note that these resources are here for you right in the Technovation curriculum. So let's get started building your first app. If you have any questions, just throw them in the chat too, and I can stop and do that, as well as we are especially a small group, so you can unmute and I can easily stop and answer questions. Once you log into MIT App Inventor, here is the kind of projects page where it may list all different projects you have. You want to click on the Start New Project button, where you can actually type in a project name. We're just going to call this First App. One thing I want you to note with MIT App Inventor is you can't have spaces in your project name. This is very common in programming, so it's a good practice anyway to not have spaces. So you'll notice that I used what we call camel casing, use uppercase letters. You can also use underscores to replace it, etc. I can very quickly also give the curriculum link. I saw that in the chat there.
Joe, quick question. Somebody asked, where did it just go? If they can test on a laptop.
The only one you can test on a laptop is if you install the emulator for MIT App Inventor. So you have to install the emulator. I can find you the link after for that. If somebody knows how to find that, that's on this call here, and wants to kind of find that quick, you should. Thunkable allows you right inside the web page to do that. So when we get to Thunkable, actually, that's how I'm going to show you how to test, and it's very easy. So that may be an advantage to using Thunkable if the students or you yourself don't have access to kind of a device to test on. We are recording this, so one of the things is if you feel lost at any point, you may want to just watch, and then you can always play this back, the recording, to kind of go back and go through it again on your own. When you open up MIT App Inventor, what you're going to see is once you create an app, the app name really doesn't matter right now for us, but I called it First App. You're going to see the design interface. This is where essentially you design your app, where you add any of the different objects or components to your app that you're going to need for your app to do its job. In order to kind of change any aspect of your app, you have over on the right-hand side here, the properties area, this properties panel. For instance, let's say we want to, right now, all our app has is a screen. You can see in our list of components that's actually part of our app, we just have a screen. You'll notice we have all these different things that we can change about the screen in the properties. For example, if we want to change the background color of our app, you can simply find the property called background color, click, and you can change it to a different color. And you'll see that it will change over on the actual preview of your screen. This is how most of the different components, when you add them into the design of your app, work when it comes to changing the design of them, how they look and how they feel. Over on the left is all the different objects or components that we can add to our app to either give it that user interface element on the screen for our users to interact with, and or add it to our project to make our app have that capability. For example, the first thing that we'll add is a button, and you can see it right at the top. All you need to do to add any of these is click and drag the element right onto the screen, the preview of the screen. When you do this, you'll notice we now have a button on the screen. When we click on that particular button over here, either on the screen or in this list of components that are part of our app, we can actually change the properties of that button. So just like how I showed you, you can change the background color property of the screen when we only had that. Now that we have a button, we can change the look of that button. We can change the background color of that button. You can change, for instance, the text on that button. Instead of text for button 1, which is not very useful, we can say, you can describe what the button is going to do. For instance, I'm going to say click me, just because we have this little example. And as soon as you type that in, you'll notice your button changes to actually say that. If you wanted to maybe have a picture, which is probably going to be very common in some of your apps, maybe a little house icon because it's the button that brings it back to the home screen or something like that, you can add an image to the button also. Change the text color. There's a number of different properties that you can look through and experiment with to change the look of your button and things in your app. Now, if you do have the MIT App Inventor companion on a device, or you have the emulator already downloaded, you can connect this app and actually interact with this button. For example, actually, I should just do this. See if I can. What you can do is go up to Connect, and you can select AI Companion if you're going to connect to one of your phone or your tablet, or Emulator if you have the emulator installed on the computer. It does have to be a Windows or a Mac computer. I believe if you have a Chromebook that's able to install Android apps, you can actually install the Android Companion on a Chromebook, and you can actually test it on there also. What's going to happen is, so I have my phone right here. After I select AI Companion, this QR code is going to appear. All you have to do from inside the actual app is click Scan QR code. It will launch the camera on your phone. You can scan the QR code, and it will connect up your app to your specific device that you're testing on. One of the things with MIT App Inventor Companion that you do need to realize is that your device that you're testing on and your computer need to be on the same internet Wi-Fi connection, essentially. So that is another kind of complicated piece to MIT App Inventor. For Thunkable, you actually don't have to be on the same Wi-Fi for it to work. But notice that on my phone, I can actually click this button and have it do something now. Now, to actually have this button do something, that is where the code comes in. We need to actually add code to make the button have an action to it. Anytime you want to have your app have a behavior and actually do something, you need to actually run it on there. Mr. Petty actually thinks that, I believe, David, you're talking about it doesn't need to be on the same Wi-Fi anymore. So he thinks that restriction is no longer, which is a possibility. Anyways, to add the code for this particular button, you have to switch over from the designer screen to the blocks screen. The blocks are where we're going to actually add the code. The code is the action behind any of the different things that you add to the app. It's the actual behavior that the user sees or experiences in your app. For instance, we can make this button do something whenever we click it. How you do that is this app development process, even when we're over in, if you're going to stay for the Thunkable one, it's event driven. So everything has to do with these event handlers. If you want something to happen on the device, in the app, you have to do it based on a particular event, something that the user does or that something happens with the app in order to make this code run. For instance, if you click on your button object, your button component you added, which is called button 1, because we just added a single button, we didn't rename it or anything, you'll see all the code blocks for that particular thing. These kind of brownish yellow kind of blocks here are what we call the event handlers. And that's what you want to find first. So no matter what you're kind of programming, you want to look for these event handlers as the starting point to what you want to have to happen. For instance, we want it when this button is clicked, we want to do something. So we can grab this block right here. If we wanted it to do something when we long clicked on the button, we would get the event handler for that. Click and drag out onto your workspace the event handler for when the button's clicked. What you can do now is whatever you want to happen when that button is clicked, you can make happen by adding code blocks inside of this event handler. For example, maybe we want to change that background color of our app whenever the button's clicked. Well, if we want to change something about that background color of our app, remember we were modifying the screen when we did that on the design. If we click on the screen in the code blocks, we'll see all the different events for the screen, as well as these green blocks, which are the properties that we were changing on design. This is how we can actually get the value of those properties, or we can actually set or change those values. For example, there's one right here that says set screen 1 background color. That will actually change the background color of the screen. Whenever you want to change something about one of these objects you add, you want to look for these green blocks and you want to get the set one to actually change it. If you need to get a value of a property of one of these blocks, you can actually go and you want to do the same thing. Here we can get the background color. So let's get the set one. You'll notice we have a little red X on this block, and that's because this block needs information still in order for it to be a complete line of code. It needs to know the color we want to set it to. You'll notice that we have all these built-in categories of blocks over here. These are things that are going to be part of any project that you open because they're just common coding things that you would need inside of your app project. They're not specific to your app. The screen and the button are specific to your app. These are things you may need in any app. For instance, a way for us to get some colors. For now, I'm just going to grab one color, something different from the background color I already set. And now, hopefully, if I go and check out my phone screen, actually, I shouldn't pick that color because it's the same color as my button. Let's go red. The app will automatically update as you're developing and as you're changing things if you have it connected to the companion. So notice now every time I click the button, it should change. It changes my background color to red because that's what my code says it for it to do. So whatever code you put inside of that event handler, it will actually perform that particular action. Let's make this a little bit more interesting so it's something you can play around with, more than just setting it to one color. If you go over to lists, for instance, we can pick a random item from a list, and maybe we can set a list of different colors instead of it just being one color. So it can be a random color every time you click on the button. This is just something just to make this idea a little bit more interesting. So grab this, pick a random item from a list block. I'm going to go to lists again, and I'm going to actually grab this make a list block. Both of these blocks that I just grabbed are in the lists area. Now I can go over and I can make a list of different colors for it to pick from. It will randomly pick. Notice that list only had 2 spots. It has only 2 elements or items there. I want more than 2 colors for it to randomly pick from. You'll notice some blocks will have this little blue gear, this modifier. Whenever you see that, click on it just to explore what that block does. So as you're going and you're learning about how to use App Inventor, you see blocks with that little blue gear, click on it just to see what it does. For instance, for a list, when we click on that, this is how we can actually add and remove the number of items in our list. So I can click on this little blue gear, and I can drag item into this little preview here, and I can add it so there's more items. For instance, I wanted there to be 5 different colors. Now I can go and I can fill this list with more colors so that there's more chance for it to select a different color each time I click the button. Every time I click this button, it's selecting a new random color. Why does it do that? Well, that's because that's what we told it to do every time the button's clicked. Whatever code you put inside that event handler will happen when that action happens, when that event is triggered. Now, let's say we wanted to add some other capabilities to this app. Let's say we wanted to do something else. For instance, maybe we wanted to say something every time the button's clicked when it changes the color. Like maybe we want to say new color each time. We can very easily do that. The design area, that designer area that we were looking at before, is what's really where we add any new capabilities to our app. Right now, our app only has the button in the screen. That's all we can change. If we want it to do something else, we need to add those things to it. So switch back over to Designer. And again, even though I didn't really give you time or talk too much about it, there's more objects or components over here on the left that we can add. Look through this list and you'll see all the different capabilities that you can add into your app. When you're brainstorming some of the capabilities of what App Inventor can do, I suggest that you look through this list. And there's even these little question marks next to it that can bring you to the documentation about how that thing works. So when you're trying to figure out, how do I program a list view? You can learn more about that by going to that area and reading the documentation. So you can look through these things. There's different media components, drawing and animation. If you need to add a map, there's map components. You can program some of the different sensors inside of the devices to get information from them. There's social components, for instance, to add texting or sharing from your app. Email picker, so it can pick emails from the contacts on the device. Storage capabilities, so you can store different items. All different kinds of things are available, but you need to add those components in order to use them and program them as part of your app. For instance, let's take a look at, go to the media section. And in the media section, find the text-to-speech component. Click and drag that onto the screen. What this component does is it allows us to take text, and the computer or the phone, tablet, whatever you're using, will actually speak that text. You've seen this, you're very familiar with it, maybe with Siri, Google, Meet, Alexa, maybe all these things that actually speak to you. Or if you use a screen reader or anything else. Again, you can just click and drag these things on. Now, what we call this is a non-visible component, because it's not something the user sees with their eyes when we add it, but we still need to add it to our app in order to actually program those capabilities. The same thing with the camera, in order to allow us to take pictures from in our app, and lots of other different things. There's still something that we need to add to our app to make it so we can use it, but the user doesn't see them with their eyes. It's not on the little preview of the screen here. Now that we have that text-to-speech, let's switch over to the blocks so we can actually add it. You'll notice that now there's a category of blocks specific to that text-to-speech. There's the event handlers for it. There's the green blocks, which are the properties. But there's also this other kind of block that I want to talk about. And so that's why this is the last piece for us for this. And this is what we call a method. These objects that we add for these components that we add to our projects, sometimes they have an action to them also. So the button didn't really have an action. The screen doesn't have an action, doesn't do something, but text-to-speech does have an action. We can make it speak a certain message. So these purple blocks, when we click on any of these objects, they are methods and they have an action to them. So for instance, we can drag this out, connect it into our event handler. So now whenever we click the button, it calls the text-to-speech speak method, and then it actually changes the background color to a random color. Some methods just do a job and that's it. They do their job and they're done. Others sometimes need information. For instance, it has an empty spot here for the message that you want it to say. This is a parameter. It needs this information to do its job. Click on text, and we can grab an empty string, an empty text block to actually provide a message. For instance, I can say new color. So now it will say new color every time I click that button. Let's see if I can let you hear this. I'll put up the volume on my phone, try to kind of hold it near. I'm going to click on this.
New color. New color. New color. New color. New color. New color.
So now it says that every time, as well as it actually changes the background color. Everything you do with App Inventor is the same process. Of course, there's some things that are much more complex that you can learn about through the Technovation curriculum. There are also tons and tons of videos online. So if you're interested in learning how to do something more, I suggest you go to YouTube and you type in App Inventor and you type in something that you want to see, and I'm sure there's a tutorial about it. So there's lots of information. But the main idea is find the component you need, add it to your app, look at the blocks to make it do that when a certain event is triggered. Sarah, you're about to say something.
Yes, we also have the advanced MIT App Inventor workshop available on our website. I'll send a link to that in the chat.
Perfect. And there are tons of videos from us, from MIT App Inventor themselves. And like I said, you can go on YouTube and there are so many different tutorials that people have made that can help you out. Are there any questions about MIT App Inventor before we look at Thunkable? In Thunkable, just so everyone knows, if you're going to stick around, we're going to do almost the exact same thing so you can see it in the platform. Some of you may be trying to make a decision about which platform to use also. All right, just let me know at any point in time. we're okay kind of answering, I'm okay answering questions and going through. So the next thing we're going to look at is Thunkable. What you're going to find if you were here throughout the whole first session is you're going to find that Thunkable is very similar to MIT App Inventor in the workflow that we're kind of going to do and the ideas that we just covered. I threw the link to Thunkable in the chat also, if it's easier for you to just click that to navigate over to this page. For Thunkable, when you click login or sign up, you can sign in with a Google account. You can just use a regular email and create a password, as well as I think they have Apple sign in also, and maybe another option. I forget, I think it maybe is just Apple sign in, Google account, or just your regular email. That may be another advantage. If you're somebody that doesn't have a Google account or your school doesn't have a Google account, Thunkable doesn't require you to have a Google account to sign in. MIT App Inventor, though, that's not necessarily a hurdle. We have ways that you can use MIT App Inventor without even a login if that's an issue. Just contact us and we can help you with that. Once you are logged into Thunkable, if it's your very first time, you're going to see a screen like this, but it will look a little different. You can see I have a number of different projects here. You won't have those projects. Instead, you might have something that just says start building in big letters. When you click on that, it will create a new project for you and this pop-up window will appear. We can just do the same thing. We can call this first app and we can create a new project. And it's going to look and feel fairly similar to the same ideas as what we looked at for MIT App Inventor. After you type in the project name, that's the only requirement in order to create an app. Even though there's some other things here, you can go ahead and click create. The motions and the same ideas, if you were here during the first session with MIT App Inventor, are going to feel very similar here in Thunkable. We have a little preview of our app screen. Over on the right-hand side, you can see all we have is a screen right now, just like how we started off in MIT App Inventor. And on the right, we have our screen properties, where we can, just like we did in App Inventor, change the background color of the app. You can then, in order to test your app in Thunkable, click on the live test button at the top. And this was one of the things I was mentioning about Thunkable, is yes, you can install it from the App Store on iOS and Android. So it's very easy to access on Android or iOS. But if you don't have a phone or a tablet, you can actually test it right here in the web browser and your app will appear here. Once we get this to do something more interesting, I'll actually show you that. I'm going to, for the purposes of it being a unique feature to Thunkable, I'm only going to use the in-browser testing environment right here. Note that some things that are specific to phones and tablets won't work in the web browser version right here. But what we're going to do today will work for perfectly fine. Most normal things work fine in the web browser version. So the first thing is we need to add something to this app to give it more capabilities. Right now, again, all we have is a screen. You can see it over here on the right-hand side. It's a screen. We can change the way the screen looks and behaves, but that's it. We need a way to add other components to our app to make it so it has those capabilities or it has that specific object and thing inside the app. On the left-hand side, similar to App Inventor, again, if you were here for the other session and comparing them, you can see all these different components or objects that we can add into our app and program. You'll notice if you compare the two between App Inventor and Thunkable, and again, this may be one of their deciding factors if you looked and evaluated both of them, there are things that are almost the same. There are things that one has that the other doesn't. At the top, though, there is the button, and let's add that over into our Thunkable app. Click, drag it right on to the screen preview in the same way we did with MIT App Inventor. When we do that, we now have a button. So now we have a screen and we have a button. We have two different things as part of our app. When you're clicked on the button, you can see the properties for the button. Notice we have button 1's properties over here. For instance, we can change the background color, text color, the text. Anything you want to change the appearance of the button, you can do that over on the right-hand side in the properties area. Again, all you have to do to test your app is click on that live test button at the top. You'll notice when you do that, now our app has that actual button we added. I can click it, it clicks like a button. We didn't program it to do anything yet, but it actually works and we can test our app right in the web browser right here. If you have it installed on your phone or tablet from iOS or Android, you can also test it right on your device. Let's go over and let's actually make this app do something. Let's make this button do something so it's not just a button that doesn't do anything at all. Over in the top left-hand corner here, we can switch from the design interface over to the blocks, and the blocks are where we can add the code. Again, app development is very event-driven. When a particular thing happens on the device, we can have certain code be triggered in order to perform an action or do something. May it be when the user clicks a button, like we're going to do in a minute, when the user gets to a certain location, if we were tracking location, when the user moves the phone a certain way. All those different things are different ways we can have an event triggered, and we can make certain code perform an action. We have these built-in categories of blocks that are in every single app that we can use, our normal toolkit, as well as the blocks that are specific to the things in our particular app, the button and the screen in our app. If you go to the bottom and you click on the button, again, we're presented with a kind of brownish yellow. These are a little bit more yellow looking, and these are the event handlers. When this button is clicked, we can make it do or perform some action. What do we want it to do? Well, we can make it change the background color, for instance. If you go to the screen, we can see code blocks for that. Remember, these green blocks, as I mentioned, if you were here during the MIT App Inventor, it's the same idea. These allow us to set and get the properties of that particular component. For instance, the screen, we want to set its background color. We want to change its background color to a new value. If I go over to live test and I click my button, it sets my background color to black, for instance, because that's what my code says right now. Whenever the button's clicked, set the background color to black. Thunkable happens to have a default value plugged into it, and you can click on, you can change that color. As well as we can go over to the colors blocks and grab some of those colors there. Now we can go over and we could make a list of different random colors to choose from. But Thunkable has this really easy thing that allows us to actually get a random color just with this single block. And it'll be more than 5 colors actually, because we don't have to make a giant list. We could have built this kind of thing also in App Inventor. App Inventor didn't abstract this kind of concept of selecting a random color for us. But anyways, once you connect that from the colors, color blocks area, every time I click on the button, it's going to choose a completely random color. Now, the other thing we did before, if you were here for App Inventor, was we actually added another component in order to add more capabilities. Same idea here. If we want to add more capabilities to our app, we have to go back to the design and we have to add that particular thing. For instance, we can go to design. We can scroll down. And in the voice category, we have a text-to-speech object that we can add into our app, and we can actually program that. Click, drag that on. Text-to-speech is an invisible component. It's not something the user sees with their eyes, but we have to add it to our project so we can actually still program that specific thing. Once you add text-to-speech, we can go to blocks. We can click on text-to-speech, and you'll notice it has a purple block. Remember, those yellow kind of C-shaped blocks, event handlers, we need one of those first. Then we can add into those event handlers any of the code we want to happen when that event happens. We can change properties of some of the things in our app with the green blocks. But these purple blocks are an action. They do something. For instance, we can call the text-to-speech's speak method. And we can make it say a particular thing. It needs information to do its job as a parameter called text. Thunkable calls it text. We can change this to new color. So it says new color each time. We go over to live test. I think I clicked share audio a minute ago, so you should be able to hear this. Every time I click it, it should show a new color, and it should say new color.
New color. New color. New color. New color. New color. New color.
Sarah, where are they going to get the recording? You may be typing in the chat.
It will be on that same resources page that I sent the link to earlier, where the MIT App Inventor recording is. We actually have all of our recordings up there from workshops that we've done over the years.
Any recording you want.
No,
Okay.
but many of them.
So let me show off a couple other things with Thunkable here. Same ideas. So for instance, one of the things that is very common is taking a picture, okay? If you go to design. We can scroll down and we can find a component called the camera. We can drag that out onto the screen and drop it. When we add the camera object, again, notice it's an invisible object, invisible component. It's not something the user sees with their eyes. It allows our app to access the camera. That means you need something to actually trigger that action. You need an object that is visible to the user that they can click to interact with it. Most apps, go to Instagram, Snapchat, there's some kind of button, right? You click, it launches the camera, or they have a camera preview. So we could add another button, for instance, to launch this camera. This process is the same in MIT App Inventor also, so people know. Of course, we could change the properties of this camera and things like that. It would be just the same as when we did that with the other button. What I'm going to do instead, just to kind of show you that this idea that we've gone through with finding the component we need, going over to the blocks and programming it, is the same with all the capabilities you brainstorm for your app. So we have a button, button 1, we programmed it, it changes the background color to a new color each time. Button 2, this new button we added, let's go to the blocks, let's make it so it can take a picture and it sets the background to that picture you take. What we would need to do is we need to go to button 2. Button 2 has an event. It's specific to when that button is clicked. So we have when button 1's clicked, but we also need when button 2's clicked now. When button 2 is clicked, we want something different to happen. We want to do something with the camera. Notice the camera has a method, an action. Remember, these methods have actions to them. It can take a photo. The method we used before for the text-to-speech speak, it needed information to do its job. Take photo gives us information. Notice it has outputs. So it actually gives us information back when it's done doing its job. For an example, the photo that the user took. If the user canceled taking the picture, or if there was an error, maybe the person's camera is broken on their device or something else. We can go over, we can set the screen's background picture. Same idea, set the property, change the property, the screen's background picture to the specific picture that's taken. What I'm going to actually do is I'm going to launch Thunkable on my phone because my webcam is currently in use, and sometimes in the camera component doesn't work that great for this. This is Thunkable running on my phone now to test the app. If I click the first button, it does what we programmed it to do before. But if I click this second button, button 2, that we just programmed, it launches the camera on my phone. Here I am. Click OK, and it sets the background to that picture. You don't have to just set the background too. You can set a button to be the picture. You can add an image object or component to your app to show the picture. So if, let's say, your app has an option for the user to take a profile picture, this is exactly the code you would add to allow them to take that profile picture. What a great picture of me, by the way. Shows how good I am at taking a selfie. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that general overview. I hope you notice the ease that it is to kind of get going and designing some small aspects to your app. One of the most important components is really thinking about the features in your app and building these small features out and testing them and slowly adding them to your app. Again, even with Thunkable, there's a lot of videos online on YouTube that you can check out. What I'm going to do now with our remaining time, we'll see you later, Mr. Petty. What I'm going to do now with the rest of our time is just see if there's any general questions anyone has about maybe the capabilities of any of the platforms, or just general questions you may have after this with this presentation. Feel free to either put it in the chat if that's what you feel more comfortable doing, or you can unmute and you can talk directly to us or me.
And if questions come up after, so once you start going and you are, facing any challenges, you can't find out the information anywhere else, please, you can email me and, well, I can't answer you, but I can send it to Joe and he very likely can. It might just be
so I can answer your questions.
Yeah.
Any questions you have about wondering later on, you're working on something, you're like, how do I do this? I can find some resources for you. I might be able to send you an example. If you are wondering about the capabilities, is this even possible? What's something you want to do? Send that message along to Sarah. She'll contact me and I'll make sure I let you know if it is possible and how you could do it. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.
And as we mentioned a couple of times, this is recorded. So if there's anything that you forgot, please, go to that resources page. If you can't find it, let me know. I can direct you there again, and you'll be able to access that. And if that is it, well, then we get to end a few minutes early. Joe, thank you so very much for your time today and for those resources that we have for the future. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. All right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, hopefully, for our next Ask Me Anything. And actually open office hours.
And Ask Me, yeah, the open office hours is a great time. Maybe if you play around with App Inventor and Thunkable throughout the week, come back, let us know if you have questions.
All right, well, hopefully we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great afternoon and evening. Bye-bye.